And you've just heard God Help the Boy by Michael Cassidy, taken from the album Wandering as Water. And I'm so pleased to be joined by Michael now. Hello, Michael.
Hi, how's it going?
Really good, thanks. So what can you tell us about Wandering as Water?
So Wandering as Water is a collection of songs that have been built up over the last kind of decade, I would say. Some songs maybe, about 10 years ago, and in the last 5 to 6 years of my kind of writing progress. And I probably had 40, 50 demos going into the album recording process. And I kind of, because of COVID and things, it basically, things got in the way, and the album recording process took a bit longer, but really it was all for the best, I feel, because it helped me kind of like really refine the songs. And me and my producer, Chris McCrory, we kind of worked on that. The actual title, Wandering as Water, comes from a book I read when I was younger called Tarka the Otter by Henry Williamson. And in the book, he says that Tarka is a name he made up himself, and he says that it means wandering as water. So the life of an otter going through the kind of wander. And I kind of use that as a kind of metaphor for kind of maybe me wandering, kind of meandering through life's pitfalls. And so, yeah, I kind of see myself as the protagonist, maybe the kind of the otter in my own little book.
Well, I remember Tarka myself. I'm sure they did a film version of it, or is that right?
They did in the late 70s. They done and it was, who was the famous, Istinov, I think, was the narrator, the famous actor. Anyway, I've reading about it recently. Also, another thing about Henry Williamson was that when I was growing up, I became quite obsessed with these books, Forgotten Voices, which were historical, basically books recounting in the 50s and 60s. Imperial War Museum got all these anecdotal evidence from survivors of the First and Second World War, and they put them all on YouTube when I was younger. And Henry Williamson, his testament of like the Battle of the Somme and Ypres Ridge, I didn't even know who he was. And then at the very end of the interview, it said Henry Williamson was the author of Tarka the Otter. And I was just, it's this kind of weird full circle type thing as well. So kind of meant to be. So that's how it kind of inspired weirdly by that. I kept on coming back to that book.
That's really interesting, because I only know him as the writer of Tarka the Otter, and because it was a big, when I was a kid, that was one of the big texts as well. And then we did the TV program about it. But he would have been a war writer, somebody who wrote about the war as well then.
Well, no, he was just a young man, really, and he just happened to be like, he was in his early 20s, I think, or like late teens when he was in the Battle of Somme and Ypres Ridge, and he just happened to be quite, when they done all the interviews with all the survivors, he was the most articulate, really, and he was amazing at getting across his story. And I think he wrote Attack of the Otter in the 20s, I think, and I mean, maybe kind of like the Tolkien thing, where it was a more like kind of almost like a metaphor for a war experience. I don't know, maybe I'm reading too deeply into it. I really liked it anyway, and I felt that the imagery. I also gigged a lot in Devon and Cornwall when I was younger, and I love that whole, the way he sets the scene. It's so in depth, and it's very, it's beautiful the way he writes about it. And I tried to kind of get that across and use some of the kind of imagery in my own music.
And there's a track called Tarka on the album.
Yeah, sorry, that's the other thing. That's it. And that opening line is Wandering as Water from that. So I kind of use some of the imagery and ideas from that. As in kind of in that song Tarka the Otter. Yeah.
And you were saying that these are songs that you've been working on over the last 10 years, because I was thinking it's been quite a while since your last album. Is that right?
Yeah. So I mean, and then that album was like 2015, and those songs were probably a good 5 years before that. So some of these songs were probably were kind of roughly get hatched at the same time as some of them songs. But then maybe like 2 or 3 of this 13 were kind of in contention, but they weren't ready or finished. And sometimes I come up with an idea and I write it in 3 seconds, 3 minutes, and that goes in. And sometimes it formulates and it gets changed and tweaked over years. So a couple of these songs, let's have a quick look right now. One in particular was We Can Breathe. That has went through about 5 different versions of that before it got to the one. In fact, my wee sister messaged the other day saying that she hadn't heard it for so long, and she was really loved the new kind of the way it went down. It was so different and fresh. So that was quite a nice thing to hear.
I was going to ask you if you felt you'd kind of changed as a songwriter and a musician over the years, but it seems like you don't discard the songs, you kind of work on them as you go.
100%. I've changed so much, and I think when I was quite guilty when I was younger. I've got an amazing backing band, amazing some of Scotland's finest musicians, and I was guilty of just, because we've got these 5-6 people, just fling them all on. We'll make it sound bigger. We'll make it sound more impressive. When in reality, the best thing to do is to. When I got older, I got a bit more introspective, and I started thinking more clearly about what the end product was or the end song was, and we started using them sparingly. And I feel this album's a great example of that personally, because I feel like we've not just thrown the kitchen sink at it. We've used musicians where needed, and it kind of makes them stand out a bit more when you hear Caris Crosby's like backing vocal on one of the songs, for instance, like Tell Me Who You Are. Like before we'd have had gangs and gangs of vocals. Anyway, my point is I feel it's that whole process was definitely helped me become a better songwriter and a better musician and maybe arranger.
Yeah, so it sounds as though your kind of approach to production has changed as much as anything.
Yeah, and Chris McCrory like was massive in that. He's like a supremely talented musician, but also an arranger and producer. He's a guy who straight away kind of maybe understood more what my strong points were, maybe more than I did. And he helped really. I done an EP with him 4 years ago that was like just a touch an eye opener for me, and I'm really so proud of that still. And those songs are definitely linked to these songs thematically and the overall sound, and that's the way I want to be now. I feel like I'm 35. I feel it's taken all that time to become the musician that I kind of wanted to be. I'm not by no means finished article, but I feel so much more proud and confident in my abilities now than I was 10 years ago. And that's fine. It's not a wasted time. It's just how it takes sometimes.
Well, I think this album feels like such a strong collection of songs. You know, sometimes you get an album where you think, well, they've maybe stuck a couple of filler tracks on the end there just to make up the numbers, but not with this. And I think what you're talking about, how long you've been working on that, probably that's the result of it.
Oh, well, thank you very much. That's very kind of you to say. I'm really proud of it. And there's some songs on there that we recorded another 4 or 5 more that got shelved kind of later on that probably will hopefully see the light of day as well from this kind of session. But yeah, no, I'm really proud of it. And I think they're also, I hear some albums and they all sound like there's like a definite current theme or strong theme going through it. And I think maybe there is in terms of like lyrically in this album, but the actual songs are quite sporadic, and I'm quite proud of that as well, because I love artists that do, like, I'm a big Rufus Wainwright fan, and his albums are never like some singular like vision where it's just everything's like he does the kind of rock opera stuff and he does simple singer-songwriter arrangement, and I've always wanted to be that kind of artist, really. They could do it, kind of try and do anything.
And you've spoken about the people that you collaborate with and work with. Are there plans to tour the album, or at least play live? And if so, is it going to be like a full band experience?
Yeah, we've got the live album launch was a full band show, and I've got a number of dates coming up, but they will probably be solo or as a duo with Michael in the band. But yeah, and we've got a live full band thing coming up at the end of August as well, which you can get details about on my kind of social media and stuff like that. That's in Cumbernauld. But yeah, the plan is always to try and get as many of the musicians involved as possible. It's not always the easiest thing to accommodate because of people's time and stuff. But yeah, so hopefully there'll be a few more band shows before the end of the year. So hopefully any good promoters listening, get us booked. And
also, I think it's another advantage of how the album is that I can imagine these songs working with yourself or with the full band. There's a flexibility there.
Oh yeah, they all were written on my own at the piano or the guitar, so that they can always go back to that. And yeah, and sometimes I play with Caris, who's like she plays the keys and sings, or she do backing vocals, or Michael or Connor on double bass. So it's nice that you can do. There's loads of little kind of different setups we can do, but yeah, it can always be done solo as well.
And you've mentioned the influence of Tarka the Otter as the book, as a kind of literary influence. What are the other influences on the album, either musical or otherwise? So,
I mean, there's for a start, the main kind of go-to for me is just my own personal life and how, I guess, love's the big one, isn't it? Like the big constant, and it's just the kind of various pitfalls and challenges I've kind of faced in the last few years. That is very heavily, I'm heavily indebted to that, both good and bad, for those influences on the album. But also there's loads of things there. For instance, Death of a Stargazer basically came about from a stupid night I had, but I was feeling I made a couple of stupid decisions, reckless decisions, but the actual title came from a obituary on Sir Patrick Moore I'd read in the Herald, and it just, this little thing came up and it just said Death of a Stargazer, and I think I read it at the exact moment where I needed to read it, and it kind of led me down a path that took me to that song through. So that's just one of the little bits. We've got there's a song on the album called Oblivious, which was written around the time of 2016, would have been the migrant crisis, and it was kind of our government's lack of response to it, and that is for me still abhorrent, their lack of response to it. And and that song was just born, kind of protest song basically out of that. And just looking through it, there's lots of inspiration. Oh, Tell Me Who You Are is a funny one, because I was kind of growing up, I was obsessed by kind of like the Wild West and kind of America and expansionism and the gold rush, and I watched loads of documentaries about it and read loads of books. So all the places and names in that song are directly referencing people and places, and the kind of, and also the kind of the displacement of like an indigenous population as well, which is something that kind of means a lot to me. So that's that song's about as well, people getting pushed out of their homes and people moving west. And
one of the things you did earlier this week was you had a kind of Twitter launch, which I wasn't aware even what that was. So there'll be other people similarly. How was it and how did it work?
So this is the Twitter listening party thing. Yeah. So this is, I mean, it kind of, I'd been kind of parley to a few of them during lockdown with the Tim's. Do you know the Tim Burgess does the Tim's listening parties?
Charlatans,
Yep, charlatans. So I think it's just Snack Magazine. We're starting basically that, but for kind of Scottish artists, and I was the kind of guinea pig. So the idea was that you tuned in at the same time, all started playing the album, and I was just kind of live tweeting about the process. So if you're interested in the album and some of the thoughts behind it, you can just search Snack Listening Party, hashtag snack Listening Party, and you can read some of my thoughts on the album. It's quite interesting, quite stressful as well, because the songs come in thick and fast, and you've got a lot to try and get in there. Oh, I mean, I feel I didn't probably as you know, I can talk quite talk for Scotland, so I quite enjoyed it, but then by the end my brain was fried because it brought up a lot of stuff very quickly, so you're like bah, bah, bah. Yeah,
I was going to say, and you're limited to characters on Twitter anyway, so
listen, that is keeping me to 150 is a stress, man.
I couldn't do that. Would be so stressful because it takes me forever to kind of make sure that everything's right when I do any tweet.
It's full of spelling errors, and it's full of little bits that I'm like, oh, I should said that more, like a bit more nicely. What am I talking about? You know what I'm trying to say.
I know exactly.
Eloquently.
And so you mentioned earlier that, this was kind of the end process of it was done during lockdown, or lockdown kind of bit into that. How did that affect you? Do you think it affected the final album, or do you think this is how it was always going to be anyway?
No, it's definitely not affected the final album. The thing it has affected is just financially, because I'm a gigging musician as well. I do like commercial music, so I'm always out playing weddings, bars, restaurants, all that kind of stuff. So that my 70% of my income was taken away overnight. So financially, I just couldn't afford to produce the album. So it rather than making it like a 6-month process, it became a 2.5 year process. So that I still got to the end goal, but personally, I'd have preferred it to be out 2019. Do you know what I mean? Or 2020 earlier. So that's fine. At the end of the day, I've got no problem with that, because maybe in the end up there's things that happened in the album that worked out for the best. I had more breathing space for certain songs. So God Help the Boy, for example, was written as a kind of acoustic guitar thing, and it was probably with that extra time, it became more, I thought actually that it would be nice to have strings in this. And then I got Rona McFarlane, an amazing string arranger. And then because we had even more time, she ended up writing this more convoluted part that really, for me, makes the song so much bigger and expansive. And it, for me, is a highlight in the album. And also we had more time in the studio that day, and she put this kind of staccato kind of, is it Philip Glass type string thing in it, and that really... Yeah, I loved it, man. So that was something that maybe wouldn't have happened if we were slightly more rushed and in a kind of set time.
Yeah, sometimes that's the way to think of it, isn't it? It's for the best.
For the best. I've never get any never get any feeling of like, oh, what could have been that? What happened, and I'm happy with it. So it's good.
Okay. Well, Michael, thanks very much for taking the time to talk to me. I think it's a cracking album. It's one of those albums that every time I listen to it, I've got a new favourite song on it, which is a really good sign. So anyway, thanks very much for taking the time.
Thank you very much for having me.
And this is Michael Cassidy and Sky Covered Blue.